Welcome, everyone, and thank you very much for being here. So, first, I would like to ask something from you. I'd like you to think about the last time when you were so immersed in an activity that it made you feel somewhat disconnected from reality. Think of an example when you were so deeply engulfed in something that you forgot to take out the laundry, or you simply forgot that you haven't had a glass of water for the last 6 hours. And you can also write it in the chat if you feel like. So what does this have to do with APIs? The thing is, 9 out of 10 developers often or always feel the experience of such a deep focus in certain activities when working with APIs. They describe this as a state of their peak performance when they feel that they can deliver anything. And how can we foster this on developer portals? We will see during the presentation, but let me introduce ourselves first. My name is Mónika Mikházi. I'm a UX researcher at Pronovix, and let me introduce to you my colleague Nóra Farkas. She's a UX designer, and for a living, we help build developer portals that make lives easier. We are also psychologists by education, which helps us in connecting the dots between the cognitive patterns and the design practices that foster developers' peak performance. So we were curious about what factors contribute to the peak performance of developers. That's why we conducted some user interviews to find out if they even experience this state at all. And if they do, when do they experience it, and how do they feel during or after this experience. We were also curious about how can design practices foster this peak performance. But first, let's see what the peak performance of developers look like. As one of them described, when you're in a flow, you kind of become your own bubble with your work and it just flows. In the beginning of the presentation, I described a scenario when you are so absorbed in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. You concentrate so much that time feels different. It might freeze or it just flies by. You might even forget about your basic needs like being hungry or feeling thirsty. And this is called the optimal performance or flow state, which is a theory by Mihály Csikszentmihalyi. He's a Hungarian-American psychologist. So we can get into this state of mind if there is a balanced skill and challenge ratio. It means that the activity is not too challenging that anxiety blocks us, and it's not too easy that we feel bored during the activity. We feel a sense of control over our actions, but it doesn't mean that we are fully confident. So we need some excitement, some arousal. For example, some developers stated that a strict deadline would give such an arousal that they are able to get into flow. In this state of mind, our self-concern also fades away, which means that we're not saying things to ourselves like, I'm not good enough for this, I can do this. So we are willing to step out of our comfort zone, and thus we can achieve more than we usually can. Immediate feedback is also a prerequisite of this state, which means that when users get a feedback about an action, it makes sure that they are on the right path and they can see where they are in the process, for example. So we conducted user interviews, as I mentioned, with the amazing UX team at Pronovix, and we talked with developers because we assumed, and based on former research, we saw that software development is a challenging job. And that's why developers may experience flow during their job often. Although previous studies show that developers feel a state of flow during their job, we were specifically interested in how flow and software development relates when working with APIs on developer portals. And we ask questions like, what activities do they do on developer portals? Do they experience flow during these activities? And if they do, when do they experience it? How do they feel? And we also asked about what helps and what distracts them during these activities. During the user interviews with software developers, we found that 9 out of 10 developers experience this state of mind when working with APIs. For example, when they are trying out the API, they are experimenting with it, or when they are coding or learning about the API from documentation, and they experience this even during troubleshooting. So It is the state of peak performance, and actually studies show that we are 5 times more productive compared to when we are not in flow. Like Ellen described, it is the state when I advance the most, when I do most of the work and when I can deliver anything. So in this state, we are inspired, we are creative, the brain is flushed with neurotransmitters, so we are feeling really great and we are more motivated than usual. As Steven described, it would make my whole development process more fun. Like it would help my motivation. I would be excited of it. This state is so rewarding that we seek the experience again and again. And developers also stated that they feel a sense of achievement after a flow experience, and they feel energized. They enjoy that they progress so much, that they build something that is working, that is used by the whole company, and the clients are satisfied with it. So another key factor is distractions, because they get you out of flow. There is a study where they found that developers in flow, if they're distracted, it takes 15 minutes for them to get back in flow if they can't get back in it at all. And what can be a benefit of supporting flow on developer portals? So as I mentioned earlier, 5 times faster 5 times more productivity can lead to 5 times faster delivery times. And we can also help them to solve their problems with the least friction possible. So if another thing is that they will reuse the solutions of your service if they get back in flow. And another thing is what we see from our previous interviews is that recommendation is one of the main sources where developers get inspired about which APIs to use. And if they experience flow, they feel that they are more satisfied and they would recommend the portal to other developers. In case of an internal portal, studies show that there is a higher chance that they would remain at your company. As Joanna said, the first few experiences that you can have with the API portal are probably the most impactful, because even if you can resolve those first problems, it's not like you're going to spend time keep going with that provider. So the developers whom we talk with also reassure that providers don't have much time to impress them when looking for APIs, because they will choose a maximum 1 to 3 and reject those where they find friction right away. So altogether, we should definitely consider the user experience when designing portals. But in addition to that, we could also optimize their workflows to flow and consider maximizing the chance that they get into flow by eliminating distractions, for example, because if we disrupt the flow, we disrupt their productivity. And we could also optimize their workflow to flow by using practices that streamline productivity, like providing instant feedback that reassures them that they're doing things right, and by providing gamification elements that give a fun factor to it all, by giving rewards to developers and allowing competition and cooperation between them. And now Nóra is going to guide you to some practical examples to see how UX design can foster peak performance on developer portals.
Thank you very much, Moni. Okay, so let's have a look at the usual developer journey when using APIs and therefore API documentation portals. The usual developer journey begins with the discovery step, and then users go to the evaluate step when they make a decision about which product or API they want to use. Next, in the learn phase, they learn everything about the API from the documentation itself. And they go then to the tryout when they can get real code examples and they can make experiments with the API and test them. Then lastly, in the build step, they can integrate the API to their project. So there's a lot of coding and troubleshooting in this step. So this journey, as you can see here, can be linear in case of so-called systematic learners, who usually tend to learn first and then try out and then build. But actually, this journey can be non-linear as well, since opportunistic learners jump straight to tryout after the evaluate step, and then they go back to the documentation to learn something if they do not understand something, and then go back to the tryout step. So they basically work with a trial and error approach. If you would like to read more about these learning styles, there's an article on pronovix.com written by one of my dear colleagues. I think the link will be in the chat messages, but reach out if you cannot find it. So the developer journey can be different depending on the learning approach of the developer, but there are some touch points with the DevPortal in every step of this journey that you can take into consideration when designing for Flow. And during our interviews, we asked developers about when they usually experience Flow during this whole developer journey. And it turned out that learn, try out, and build steps have the highest chance for experiencing Flow. In the next few slides, I'm going to focus on these 3 steps, and I'm going to show you some examples of how to make sure that these Flow experiences actually happen. And we gathered the examples from this year's DevPortal Awards nominees. So here we are in the learn phase, where there's a pretty high chance for Flow. In order to define what solutions boost the Flow experience, we need to understand the user needs in every step. So here the typical user needs are to learn quickly and effectively, remember the basic concepts, and user might want to skip parts of the documentation that they are already familiar with. From a user experience perspective, interactivity and consistency can really boost the Flow experience of a developer when reading through guides and documentation. An example from Miro Developer Platform shows how instant feedback and the sense of progress can involve users more easily when reading the guides. So each guide page have a progress indicator at the top and the time to complete information. And also when users read the part of the documentation, they can mark this section as completed and proceed to the next one. This is something that can give the sense of achievement and sense of progress for the users. Also, this layout is consistent throughout the whole guide section of the platform, and this also enables users to experience a sense of control, which is an important element of Flow. Inclusive design is something that is a must these days. We talk about it a lot. And most people think about accessibility, color contrast, or screen readers in this case, but I think taking into account developers with diverse skill sets is also really important. For example, here on the React.dev portal, we can see some so-called deep dive sections, which the users can expand and read more details about a certain topic. So this way, for example, more seniors who have the skill set can deep dive into these sections, or even they can decide to skip it, which enables them, for example, to stay in Flow. And others with other skill sets can read it through all to have the whole picture, or they can also skip it. So there's a decision for the users to skip parts of the documentation. Okay, so in the tryout phase, when users are already working with the code, they see some examples, they really want to know how it really works. They want to understand how they can integrate this solution to their project. In case of tryout, of course, AI solutions can help a lot, since they give immediate feedback via this question-answer format that we have here. Coded Docs has a cool AI functionality under the name of CodeChat, where users can ask questions or even give orders to write a sample code, for example. And when asking a questions, users usually have a clear goal, a clear question in their mind, which is also a prerequisite of Flow to have a clear goal. And by getting answers quickly, they can solve problems more easily, overcome these problems, these questions, and consequently, there's a higher chance for them to get into flow state. Using these AI tools also have the cool factor, the fun factor, which is also a really important thing in flow. Spotify for developers has a great triad option as well. They decided to have the triad function right on the homepage, which enables users at the beginning of the developer journey to jump to the tryout. This actually takes into consideration those developers that have an opportunistic approach when learning. Also, they provide a real example as the result of the tryout. So if users connect their own Spotify account to this Spotify for Developers platform, as a result, they can get, for example, their top 5 tracks from the last 30 days. This real example also enables them to understand the concept right, and then consequently get into flow. So in the last step, which is actually the build step, users really want to work effectively without any interruptions or minimal interruptions. It's also important that in case of troubleshooting, they want to find solutions to their problems. In this step, Miro Developer Platform provides the fun element, again, for the flow experience by adding gamification elements. In this particular example, badges can be earned in particular steps of the integration. This gives the users the immediate reward, the immediate feedback that they are on the right track, and the experience can also be fun and engaging. On Mapbox Docs, we can see a great practice for enabling live communication. Nowadays, many portals have Discord or other community interfaces when users can collaborate with each other and help each other. And actually, this is something that was also highlighted by our interview participants many times, that they seek for these opportunities and they really like using these platforms. So in the troubleshoot section of Mapbox Docs, we can see clear entry points to this option, as well as the Ask AI. This is also available from the troubleshoot page. So engaging in live communication and having this question-answer format is also an important thing in this step as well. On the developer portal of ABN AMRO, we can see some good examples for how to incorporate use cases to the support options of the portal. So here, users need quick and easy support in case of troubleshooting, and sometimes they want to reach out to the support team of the portal, of the provider. And making these different use cases helps users to navigate on the support page based on their progress in their integration or based on their preferences. So this is definitely a step which supports users in not to get out of flow, so to stay in flow, by providing clear entry points from their point of view. Okay, and as a summary, I would like to give you some do's and don'ts, some things to aim for and some things to avoid when designing for flow. Interactive journeys are tools you can definitely incorporate into your portal. Also, giving results as soon as possible after the user enters the portal. As mentioned, gamification elements can also have a significant role in the fun aspect. Inclusive design is also something to aim for, taking into account the skill sets of the developers. So on the don't side, there's this complex long descriptions. That is something you might avoid. And the lack of feedback about the progress is also something to avoid, because feedback gives the users the reassurance that they are on the right track. Inconsistent user flows and design elements take away the control from the users, and so you should always aim for consistency in this regard as well. So with keeping these in mind, I think you can take your user experience to a whole new level when designing for Flow. And if you can be successful in this, you can give developers the rewarding experience of Flow. I think this is a personal experience, which is really powerful, which can result in having more trust for the provider, and in the future, probably seeking for these opportunities more often. And last but not least, as a disclaimer, I would like to talk about the importance of user needs. So these are the best practices that I have shown you. These are really useful, but they will not necessarily work on your portal. They will not necessarily work on your users, on your audience. So always get to know them, always get to know their needs, their real needs. User journey mapping can be a great tool for this, to understand the user needs, taking into consideration different kind of personas. And also there's this data-driven design that I would like to highlight. If you can always make decisions based on some kind of data, this data can be user interviews, usability tests, or analytics. We know that it's definitely a challenge, but here in Pronovix, we really believe in the importance of user research. Actually, next week we will be in Paris for the API Days conference. So if you happen to be there and want to talk about these topics, you can reach out to us. And lastly, always ask yourself why when designing for Flow, as Backstreet Boys and 4-year-olds often ask to. Thank you for your attention.